Hi, everyone. We're waiting for just a few more people to join. We'll be getting started in exactly 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for taking time out of your very busy days to be with us today. We've got a great turnout for this one. Quite frankly, I'm not too surprised. We've been looking forward to doing this particular presentation for quite a while. My name is Marcus Scrim. I'm a marketing strategist here at Ascendle. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, the 2021 State of Custom Software Delivery Report. Today's program, well, it's an all-star panelist discussion between some of our Ascendle's top chief product leaders. We're going to take a deep dive into our own original research about how top technology companies, probably like your own, build their organization for maximum agility to deliver business results. Now, before we begin the presentation, a couple small housekeeping items. Want to remind you that we are going to be running a live Q&A towards the end of the program. We have enabled that Q&A feature. It's located in the Zoom controls on your screen. Please feel free to use them. Please feel free to submit questions that you have during the presentation. You can also click on the like button to upvote your favorite questions as they come in as well. Also, as a special treat, as you leave this webinar, you will be asked to participate just a short survey about today's presentation. We love your feedback so we can continue to develop a better and future content for you. And of course, if you missed anything in today's presentation, absolutely do not worry. We will email you a link to this particular webinar recording along with the slide deck. And of course, the full copy of today's research that we're going to be just highlighting some of the smallest points today, but we will get you the entire white paper, and it's impressive, I promise you. Now, the slide in front of you includes the logos of several of the clients we've worked with through the years. In addition to being proud of the mobile, web, and platform applications we've helped them build, though, we're especially grateful to them today and hundreds of others who participated in this particular survey that was used to develop today's research. Those of you familiar with Ascendle know that we like to say that we wrote the book on Agile, or at least our CEO, Dave Todaro, did. Dave spent 2 years to capture everything we know about Agile development, and in 2019 published the 500-page Epic Guide to Agile that we use company-wide during day-to-day operations. Still, it's fair to say Dave's book wouldn't exist if the original Agile Manifesto hadn't been published 20 years ago, which brings us to the topic of today's webinar. Recognizing this momentous birthday for the Agile Manifesto, we sent out a survey to hundreds of Agile practitioners. Today's program is just all about what they all had to say. Today's agenda, it's going to be a deep dive into what we learned while doing this survey. First, we'll share a bit about who actually took it. If content is king, well, truly context is queen. So we want to be certain that we know where that data was actually coming from. From there, we're going to examine company leadership, the drivers behind Agile, the results companies are getting, and more. There's so much to cover here. We won't get to it all, which is why after this webinar, you will get the full copy of the results. So at this point, I'd like to welcome our panelists. Please turn on their cameras and their microphones as well. That will certainly make the program better for everyone. Please share with us a little bit about your role at Ascendle, and because it is a question that we asked the survey respondents, when I ask you to introduce yourself, the first question I have for each of you is how long you personally have been practicing Agile. First up, Tina Reynolds.
Hello, yes, I'm Tina Reynolds. My main role at Ascendle is to ensure that our project teams are delivering excellent results for our clients. And I began practicing Agile 4 years ago when I joined Ascendle as a product owner. Prior to that, I had spent 30 years developing software with traditional methodologies, and I can think back to many projects that would have benefited from an Agile approach.
Terrific, terrific. Next up, Tom Schwendler.
Hi, I'm Tom Schwendler. I am a product owner at Ascendle. I've been with Ascendle for 6 years now, practicing Agile for 8 years, starting as a QA engineer, then a Scrum Master, and then as my product owner role. Before that, I've been writing code early on since the late 80s, and like Tina, have seen the differences between Agile now and old methodologies for managing products. And I'm really excited to see and discuss the results of this survey.
Thanks so much, Tom. And I think I speak for all of us when I say you've got the best looking office. Although we can't tell from our last panelist because she's got it cleverly blurred. Susanna Parham-Mitchell.
Yep, I'm hiding a crib in our shared room here. Hi, everybody. I'm Susanna Parham-Mitchell. I joined the Ascendle team in November of 2017, so coming up on about 4 years of time with this particular awesome team. Before that, I held a variety of roles across several different industries, and in those roles, I've been either directly or tangentially working with Agile and other methodologies for the better part of 7 years. These days, I work with one of Ascendle's enterprise clients, helping to align the non-development portions of the organization, such as sales, support, delivery, finance, training, etc., with the Agile practice and the delivery cadence of the development teams, ultimately to efficiently get software products into the market.
Outstanding. So today we've got 3 incredible panelists, all with deep and yet unique Agile experience. So let's go into the results and see what the panelists had to say about them. Now, recognizing those unique experiences of our panelists, let's juxtapose that with what our survey respondents had to say. We asked survey respondents about the demographics. We asked them, what size employers are you working for? How widespread Agile is within the organization, and about how many years that it's been practiced there as well. So if we take a look at those respondents by company size here, one of the first things we note is that Agile is everywhere. In fact, the largest group from our survey pool was at companies with only 1 to 20 employees. Tom, let's start with you. I know you've cut your teeth at several startups through the years. Are you surprised that there's so much Agile happening among smaller companies these days?
Actually, not at all. It makes perfect sense that startups are using Agile. First of all, it's pretty easy to get started with it. It's a small framework. It's simple to get started. As we'll discuss, it takes a long time to perfect. But the main thing is that the whole principles of Agile is you want to work on the most important features first, get them out to market as quickly as possible, which is a perfect strategy for a startup who needs to get revenue right away or as quickly as they can. Obviously, it's important for every organization, but especially so for a startup.
The shorter the runway, the faster you want to make sure that you're in good shape there. Let's move on to our next demographic question. At the same time, if we look in terms of how far Agile has moved across an organization, there's a real continuum here. We see a healthy percentage of respondents say they're running Agile pilots. Yet a total of 21% say they've either reached Agile at scale or at the enterprise level. And Susanna, that's where you work. How do you feel about that large number, getting Agile to scale at the enterprise level? What are some of the challenges that prevent companies from doing that?
Well, first, I think the number doesn't surprise me. In general, the use of scaled agile, as well as the evolution of those frameworks, I think offers a lot of value to large organizations, and it's really catching on. The challenge I mentioned in my intro that I'm currently helping to solve, specifically the ability for the other parts of the agile organization to align, to produce, to pivot, and really stay at the same pace as development, is one I think a lot of larger organizations face. And big enterprises seem to have trouble with business and go-to-market agility in general. So working, I think, within a scaled agile construct that really integrates the organization means a shorter lead time, and I think can help address that problem.
We asked a lot of questions in this particular survey about scaled frameworks, so I'm glad Susanna's going to be here to walk us through those. And finally, as you recall, we asked our panelists how long they've been working in Agile. I believe the numbers were something like 4 years, and 8 years. We asked all our respondents how long had they been working with Agile. Nearly 2/3 of them said they'd been so for more than 3 years. So those of you who've read Malcolm Gladwell's famous and often famously misunderstood book Outliers, he suggests true expertise comes around 10,000 hours. Well, if we assume a 40-hour work week, that means 3 years of Agile experience gets you about 60% of the way there. Tina, question for you. You spent a lot of time doing things different ways, waterfall ways. You've been doing this now for 4 years. Do you have thoughts about how much experience someone needs to really appreciate both the benefits and the potentials of Agile?
Yes, yeah. As Tom mentioned, the principles of Agile are simple to understand, but I do believe it takes years of experience to really leverage all of the potential of Agile. So courses and books are a great introduction, but the best way to really start learning is just applying the concepts on real projects, and then in true Agile fashion, iterate and innovate. So this focus on learning and improving is built into most Agile frameworks with ceremonies such as the retrospective, where teams examine what went well and what could be improved after every sprint. The Scrum process that we use at Ascendle, that is written up in the book you referenced, that's based on over a decade of lessons learned. So I would say that it takes about 4 to 6 years of practice before organizations really start to excel.
Outstanding. It's a great answer. And so just to tie a bow on this, one of the things that we were painfully aware of was when we began to talk about some of the conclusions that we're making here. We wanted to have a lot of confidence in the data that we're putting out there. So what are we dealing with here? Well, we're dealing with a pretty well qualified group. They're representing a wide variety of organizations, and for the most part, they've certainly been through more than a few sprints. So let's move forward into some of the key lessons learned throughout this study. A key question we asked was regarding leadership support. Is leadership bought into your organization being Agile? And in fact, we saw that there was overwhelming leadership support. By and large, wow, roughly, if you take a look at those two large pie slices there, 2/3 said Agile was either fully supported in their organization, or in fact, upper leadership was the reason Agile was started in the first place. Tom, I'm going to break the first rule of interviewing right here. I'm going to start with a closed-ended question, and I beg you to elaborate. Can Agile even survive without strong support?
In a word, no. It's interesting because one of the roles that I have had in the past at Ascendle is one of kind of an Agile advisor going into companies that are struggling. And one company that really comes to mind, I went in there, they had really hard working development teams that were working in a really good Agile way, but they didn't have Agile support from their leadership. The leadership was dictating to them timeframes that they needed things to be done by. They were telling them exactly how they needed to do things. They weren't letting the team own their own work. The end result was the development teams had a really low morale, and the rest of the company didn't really trust what was coming out of the development team. So it really made the point clear that you could have really good, hardworking agile teams, but if it's not supported by leadership, it can really, basically agile can totally fail.
Susanna, flip that coin over for us. So Tom gave us some examples there of what leadership support doesn't look like. What's true leadership look like in an organization where we're really seeing the type of positive support that we're looking for?
Sure, I have some thoughts on that. I'll just first mention, looking at this slide, I wonder how many of the respondents were the leaders of the organization. I think it's interesting to think on that. But for your question, some key indicators, I think, that leadership is truly supporting the process are, I think, first, decentralized decision making, meaning leadership is fully trusting the teams to make decisions and to truly own the product. I think it's all about empowerment and letting the teams have that autonomy. Another one, I think, has to do with alignment among the leadership members. So as I mentioned before, I focus on full organization, not just development. So I think an indication that leadership is behind Agile is that all parts of the organization are in and stay in alignment on priorities, the go-to-market vision, that everybody's rowing in the same direction and working towards the same goals.
That's a great answer. Tina, anything that you would want to add to that?
I think Tom and Susanna touched on most of my thoughts, but I think one thing that happens is leaders say, I want my organization to be agile, but then when the day-to-day happens, it's difficult to let go of that command and control mentality. So true leaders have to be very involved in supporting the team, but they can't be telling the team what to do or disrupting their sprints. So it's really a balancing act, because the team needs the leader to be out there supporting them, removing obstacles, helping set priorities, being very involved in sprint reviews and that sort of thing. But then during the sprint, the leader also needs to step back a little and trust the team that the team is going to get the work done. And that's a fine balancing act for leaders to learn when they first switch to Agile.
It's a big ask, and absolutely crucial. When people take a look at the full results of the study, we found across the board, in fact, that the more leadership support you had, the higher you ranked in everything else. So we could literally do an entire webinar, and we might someday, on proper Agile leadership. So from there, we wanted to move on to what are the potential drivers for your organization? What were the reasons that you even wanted to do Agile in the first place? And we actually gave respondents the 5 potential drivers that we have listed here on the screen in front of you. And we said they could select up to 3 that were their top 3 for their particular company. Now, Agile's promise has long been the ability to deliver software faster. Not surprisingly, as respondents agree, this was their primary reason for adopting Agile methodologies. You're seeing them actually ranked in the order that they came in. And in fact, fully 76% of those respondents listed this as a top 3 reason. The second most cited driver for utilizing Agile was that pursuit of, quote, fast and continuous improvement, underscoring perhaps the need of all businesses to move quickly away from decisions that might hinder future development. So clearly, the number one reason companies pursue Agile is speed. Tom mentioned that as a key reason why startups and small companies do it. Tom, why do they think of Agile as being the magic bullet to the speed problem?
Well, if you compare it to the other main management framework of waterfall, I mean, it's night and day as far as speed goes. You can get a product, an MVP, a minimum viable product, out to market using an Agile methodology faster than probably you could create your specifications for a waterfall project. They're completely opposite management styles or management frameworks, and it's just the inherent nature of Agile to get it out to market faster. And but there's also another benefit too. By getting it out to market earlier, not only are you getting that revenue, but you're also getting that crucial feedback from your customers, and kind of goes along with number two, with continuous improvement. You can utilize that feedback to improve your product based on the feedback of your customers, so they're getting what they need.
So it's interesting, you talk about that fast and continuous improvement. So Tina, what I heard Tom just say there was, you might think that you're going to develop a feature, but then the feedback tells you that you should do something else. So it sounds like that's where that increased flexibility might come in.
Sure, yes. Agile organizations acknowledge that business conditions and customer requirements change constantly. So yes, if you're getting a new product out to market, you may think you know what the customers want, but we often say that customers don't really know what they want until they see it. So having that quick feedback loop is one of the key benefits of Agile, because you can pivot. So an Agile product owner can quickly shift their team's priorities. The team may do a sprint, get something in front of a customer, and the customer says, well, this is great, but it would really be fantastic. And the product owner's like, yes. And so right the next sprint, they could start working on a different feature. Flexibility, we saw that in action during the pandemic. So we have a client who's in the hospitality software industry, and they completely pivoted because the hotel industry changed so much. So instead of building what they were planning, they built features related to managing COVID protocols at hotels. And it was a great example of one of the great benefits of Agile.
Tom, in today's program, we're talking all about Agile, all about processes. We're not talking a whole lot about technology, but you've said before that when you talk about this idea of fast and continuous improvement, the cloud computing has pretty much rendered these big releases every few years kind of obsolete. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Oh, sure. So, yeah, as I said, I've been coding since the 80s. So I remember in the old days, right, we would work for, a year, 6 months, more like a year and a half, 2 years, to build up everything for a release. And you put it on initially we had it on a whole stack of floppy disks. And then we were really excited when we went to CDs, we could fit it onto one CD, but still, it's all that work to get one release out. And it was a major process. And then you get the release out, and then all the bugs come in and all the calls come in and everything. But yes, now with cloud computing, and kind of it's perfect timing, with the Agile methodologies, you can continuously updating your application. You can, update feature at a time. So you're able to get those improvements, and not only are you getting those improvements out to your market quicker, but there's nothing better when you have a customer that requests, an improvement, and you're able to get that out to them in a month or two's time. Man, you got a customer for life, and they spread the word to everybody else. So it's a great benefit for the company, and it's a perfect fit for an Agile methodology.
Outstanding. Number 4 out of the 5 was solving those silos between business and IT. And but before we move on from these drivers, Suzanne, I would love your thoughts on that. I feel like whenever we talk about silos, the biggest silos tend to be in the biggest organizations at the enterprise level. Talk to me a little bit about those silos between business and IT, and why companies need to be concerned about that.
Sure. I feel like I live in this every day. So I think these drivers are interesting. And so if you look at solving silos between business and IT, you mentioned speed in the earlier ones. I think when you really dig down to solving the silos between business and IT, it's also about speed. I think the goal would be to reduce miscommunication and misalignment, the things that happen when you have siloed information. Ultimately, fixing that speeds things up, helps you get to market faster. Honestly, it's the same also about what Tina was talking about, mentioning flexibility. That's also about being fast to respond. I'd venture that this last one too, needing digital first agenda. is probably also about speed. I'm assuming that's related to efficiency, automation, digitizing the whole workplace. And so I think, responding about large organizations, you really can't see the benefit of agile development without also doing these last two. So they're certainly important drivers for large organizations.
Terrific. Thank you. So when we did this particular study, you've got the 5 drivers on the screen there in front of you. So what we did was we asked the respondents to tell us what their top 5 drivers were, their top 3 rather. And then we also asked them to rate themselves against their cohorts for each of the 5. So we're not going to share all those with you today. We don't have the time to do it, but this is interesting. So people said that they wanted to pursue Agile for reasons related to speed. And then we asked them, okay, well, would you say you ship faster than your cohorts? Never, sometimes, or always. And so what we really wanted to do was get a feeling of, do you believe that you are in fact faster than the competition? And I got to be honest, though, at first glance, the results here are somewhat surprising, perhaps best labeled as cautiously optimistic. Listen, 2/3 of our respondents had listed faster delivery for one of their top 3 drivers. Less than 10%, though, had the confidence to give themselves a 5 and say, we always ship faster than the competition. Now, nearly a third did score themselves a 4, but that delta can't be ignored. In total, nearly 40% of those organizations that said they were pursuing Agile for faster software delivery, by their own acknowledgement, they're saying, well, yeah, but we don't always do it. So there are all kinds of questions to unpack here. The number one reason companies pursue Agile is to ship software faster, yet less than half of them said they were doing so relative to the competition. Tina, why in the world would, if I'm a truly Agile organization, why would I not be shipping software faster than the competition?
Well, building software is difficult, and then shipping software quickly is even more difficult because it's not just about building. It requires close collaboration across a number of teams, which Susanna alluded to. And I think the companies that ship the fastest in each industry probably have heavily invested in training their teams, fine-tuning their processes, and automating as much as possible.
Well, it's a great point. And Tom, you've said this before. It's more than a framework, right, to be successful?
Yeah, it kind of goes along with, being adopted by the entire organization. Along with the Agile principles, you have to have a technical strategy to go along with that, to allow you to work in this Agile way. Everything from how you do your quality assurance to how your DevOps works, your continuous integration, continuous deployment. There's a lot of technical aspects to constructing software in an Agile way. And I think based on my experience in working with different companies, that's one of the biggest pieces that is the hardest of the puzzle to fix.
Yeah, and certainly not the only one, though. Susanna, you on the last comment, you had so much to say about speed. And one of the things that I really heard from when you were talking about speed was this idea that shipping software isn't just a product development problem, but it really touches all other functions of the organization. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Just to elaborate a little more, just having the software ready and shipping it is not necessarily where value is achieved. It's when it's in the market, your organization is supporting it, they're selling it, customers are using it, and it's really achieving its original goal. That's when value is achieved, and so it's more than just the development team, it's the entire delivery to the market of that.
I think that's extremely well said. So it's beyond more than just being Agile, and certainly beyond more than just being Agile in your software delivery department as well. Tina, let's flip this around and be a bit more optimistic, though. One of the things that we noticed was 43% of the audience did rate themselves up in those 2 top quintiles, but only 21% of respondents put themselves in the bottom 2 quintiles. So I would have loved to see more 4s and 5s, but let's talk about the fact that there aren't a lot of people who are giving themselves 1s and 2s. Is it fair to say that if Agile doesn't guarantee you'll finish at the top of the pack, at the very least, it can keep you from being at the bottom of it?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, even if you can't be at the very top of your industry, Agile keeps you competitive. I fully believe that. And I would probably wager that some of the companies that responded, the 1s and 2s, may have adopted Agile, but they may not have fully given up a waterfall. You know, we refer to the old methodologies as waterfall mindset. You know, the more finely tuned the Agile processes, those companies are probably getting the 4 or 5s. So some people say, oh, we do Agile, but they still want to write full specifications for every user story. And they still have not like pushed out all the inefficiencies in their processes. So, but you have to start. So yes, be Agile, keep working at it, keep iterating and evolving.
Susanna, did you have something you wanted to add there?
I did, thank you. I just want to add that Agile in theory is so different than Agile in practice. And I think one of the struggles here where you see folks in that bottom, for the larger organizations at least, it probably comes down to what I was alluding to before, that shared vision. You know, it's not that waterfall approach where you set the goal and then you all work towards it for 3 years. And the Agile mentality, really, those goals shift. You're responding, you're pivoting, you're reprioritizing ruthlessly all the time. And the whole organization needs to stay along for that journey. And so it really comes down to continuous, clear articulation of vision.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. One of the other things that we really did not do in this particular survey was really, hold people's feet to the fire, if you will, and figure out how disciplined and how diligent they are about Agile practices. Obviously, it's one thing to say you're Agile, and it's one thing to to live your life with the 500 pages of Dave Todaro's book. Tom, it sounds like even in organizations that call themselves Agile, you almost got to suspect that maybe they're not also following all aspects of the process. What's an example that might come to mind?
Yeah, it is easy to, the Agile Manifesto isn't a large document, right? It's more of an overall philosophy. And you can really say, my development team is really Agile. Those guys really work well together. We're running, sprints, and we're doing Scrum, and we're doing all that stuff. But maybe it's very common in a lot of companies that their quality assurance people are in a completely separate department, maybe even in a different location. So the developers are developing stories, they're using all of the practices, but it gets all stalled because they got to complete it to a level. Then they ship it off to the QA department, and they're not working Agile. They don't think in an Agile way, and it could take them a week. And so these guys that are trying to work Agile in development are just sitting there. And I've seen this personally happen. So I was working with a client that was Agile, but they would get their development work, they'd get it out to QA, and then they would sit there and wait for QA to come back before they could close the story. And so again, they were doing everything they could, but the whole company didn't embrace it. And they didn't think about all the moving parts of all the different departments. And ultimately, they were, again, maybe practicing Agile, but certainly not at a high level of productivity.
Yeah, and I think that's probably fair for a lot of companies. Would you agree, Susanna?
Yeah, I was talking over you there real quick. I couldn't help but jump in and say QA is one example, but it could be any department. If you have one department or one area of the organization that isn't kind of along for the same cadence and working towards the same priorities, it's going to slow you down tremendously.
Awesome. Terrific. So Now, so while Susanna's been talking, Susanna is spends so much time in the enterprise, and so let's go back to those skilled frameworks that I alluded to before. Those of you on the call who are used to Scrum, you know the rule. How big should a Scrum team be? Well, it shouldn't be any bigger than one that can feed a Scrum team with a single pizza. But many organizations, well, they want to grow Agile beyond that. So today there are so many different scaled frameworks out there. We've got Scrum of Scrums, we've got SAFe, we've got Less, we've got Spotify. But this list just goes on and on. So one of the questions that we asked our respondents was what scaled frameworks, in fact, they are using. Let's take a look at the results here. So the first thing we see is 30% indicated none whatsoever. Susanna, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. I'm going to guess that some of the people that aren't using none are probably in a very small organization. But what's a bellwether? What's an indicator that maybe it's time for us to be looking at any of these scaled frameworks?
Sure. I think there are a couple of indicators, right? It's certainly not a one size fits all. I think first, if your organization is supporting multiple teams, then there's likely immediate benefit from one of the simpler frameworks like Scrum of Scrum, just to keep teams communicating about dependencies and any efficiencies they can gain from one another. Again, just rowing in the same direction. But when you're supporting multiple teams across multiple product lines, maybe if your leadership is fragmented, then I think that's an indicator it really is time for one of the scaled frameworks, perhaps even one of the more robust scaled frameworks, such as SAFe.
Terrific. Now, curiously, and I'm not going to show you a graph on this, but one of the other things that we saw, if you go back to that bar graph, was the companies that were actually giving themselves 4s and 5s for their ability to ship software faster than the competition. We found that they were either using SAFe or Scrum of Scrums, or sometimes both. Tom, is this causation or is this correlation? How do you think about the fact that these scaled frameworks are in place of organizations that are scoring themselves higher for shipping software?
The way I think about this is the organizations that are using a scaled framework, they've most likely been using Agile for a longer period of time. In order to, kind of set up that scale framework, you have to first realize that you need it. So I think when most people start, they start with the basic, a basic Agile framework like Scrum, and start using it and perfect it. And then they realize, wait a minute, I got multiple teams that I need to manage. They might be managing a single product backlog. Maybe there's multiple product backlogs. So I think it is kind of an evolution of your practice of Agile. You start off with perfecting the framework itself, and then you add on that scaled framework on top.
So obviously a scaled framework, Susanna shared with us when it might make sense. We are seeing that if you're using a scaled framework, there tends to be reporting of shipping software faster. But Tina, I'm looking at the screen in front of me, and there's several different frameworks on there. My guess is there'll be more new ones coming out in the next couple of years. How would you advise an organization to decide which of them they should even be experimenting with?
Sure. Well, one of the Agile principles is that simplicity is essential. So organizations should start with the simplest scaled framework that meets their needs. So factors to consider are the number of teams that need to coordinate their work, the overall Agile maturity of those teams. As Tom said, are these teams already good at being Agile as a team? Because that's very important. The team's familiarity with each framework and the team's preference for each framework, because you want a framework that people will feel good about and will be anxious to adopt. Because at the end of the day, all of these frameworks have the same goals, that similar to what Susanna mentioned. They want multiple teams to be able to efficiently work on the same solution through good communication and coordination of priorities and dependencies. So if you try a framework and you find that it's actually decreasing your organization's agility, then that's a signal, okay, that one is not working. Let's try a different approach.
That's a great answer. Suzanne, I want to come back to you with one final question on these scaled frameworks. There were a couple of respondents. If you look down in the lower right, those were all the different frameworks that were mentioned at least once. And we had a few that they said, well, we kind of do our own thing here. They admitted to rolling their own, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that, Susanna? Is it good to be creative here? Should you be using an existing framework? What advice would you give a client who says we're going to try our own thing?
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot in my role. I think that first, I might be in the minority here. This is personal opinion, but I don't think any one scaled framework is an automatic perfect fit for any organization. I think every organization has challenges that are specific to them, and those challenges also can shift over time. So I think it's important to treat any of these frameworks as such, as frameworks and not as gospel. And I think one thing that really is successful is adapting them as needed to really work within the organization's specific structure. In terms of growing your own, I guess if your organization has the process creation capacity and change management skill set and structure in place, then a custom solution can really work well. I'm not sure if I would start there. I think it's probably easier to adopt one and adapt it rather than to start from scratch.
I love that answer. Tom or Tina, do you have anything to add to that? I have no follow-up question. That was just a great answer, Susanna.
No, my thoughts were exactly the same as Susanna, that I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think it's, kind of combining what Susanna and Tina said, that, the best you can do is try one out, and it may be a fit, it may be not. Then decide, do I want to, if it's close, maybe I can make some changes. If it's not even close, then let's try another one.
Outstanding. That was a fun topic. I want to move. We're going to do a total right-hand turn here. We want to talk about vendor alignment. Obviously, Ascendle, we are a vendor in the space, so we had some questions about how do software companies or how do organizations think about hiring vendors like Ascendle. So we want to ask a couple questions regarding whether or not you think it's important to choose a vendor whose agility aligns with your own. There are many times in business we seek out vendors that have, industry experience. The idea being that if a vendor understands the industry, they might understand your challenges. They might have a better understanding of how to overcome them. So this question was similar but different, inquiring as to whether you like your vendors to share the same agile frameworks for overcoming those challenges. I want to come at this particular survey question from a few different angles. Tina, we had 15% of respondents who took the survey who said they don't currently use agile. So, what happens if a waterfall type company wants to use an Ascendle? What does that look like? Can it even work?
It could be challenging because our agile process is really a big component of our value proposition at Ascendle. So I think it depends on the parameters of the engagement and the dependencies that we may have on the customer's teams, their willingness to participate in an agile process. For example, if the customer came to us and said, you must write all your requirements before you can code, you must tell us exactly when this will be done, this exact scope. We need to know when this exact scope will be done, and it must hit this date. Depending on how flexible they are or inflexible, it might not be a good fit, because frankly, Agile is a completely different way of thinking about building software. So we would definitely have to have some conversations before signing on with a traditional waterfall company.
So let's flip that coin over and look at it from the other side, Tom. Assuming an organization is bullish on Agile, as were most of the people who took the survey, what synergies happen when you choose a partner that speaks that same language?
Yeah, it turns out again, we've had multiple experiences with this. It turns out it's a very fruitful partnership, especially for that organization. And there's multiple benefits for that organization. So first of all, yes, you're able to communicate in the same way to do that planning. You're thinking about things in the same way. The second is you're getting the delivery from your vendor at a faster pace than, you know, if it was a waterfall type of a vendor. So you're able to get that to market, but you're also getting not only the you know, the software development, and hopefully it's, you know, very good and well crafted software, but you're also getting the benefits of seeing how that vendor works. If that you know, if it is a true partnership, that vendor is working really closely with you, and as an organization, you can kind of see how they do their work. And if you're practicing Agile too, you can see some things that they're doing, make some improvements in your own Agile practices, and gain a lot of new productivity that way, which I think every client that we have worked with, not only have they benefited from the projects that we produce, but they've been able to learn a lot from our practices and just working with us.
I'm guessing that there's more than a few companies who are attending the webinar today that have found that, you know, like to think of themselves as very agile organizations, but sometimes, you know, they bring along a vendor who isn't as agile as they would like. Tom, do you have any advice on clever workarounds for an agile organization working with a non-agile vendor?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely not uncommon. You know, one of the most common like types of vendors that may not be working in an agile way are UX designers. You know, a UX designer, there's a lot of upfront, you know, capturing of information, and then using that information. They need to think on a whole level. They're artists. They're, you know, in some ways they're more of an artist, and they have to complete their whole painting before they can work with it, you know, call it finished. But there are UX designers that are more comfortable working with agile development than others. And so you know, trying to find those kinds of vendors, maybe they aren't truly agile themselves, but they're used to working with agile, other agile partners. So for UX design, maybe it's coming up with an overall theme that would be consistent through the application, but each individual experience on the page can come more in an agile way, you know, through just the evolution of the project. Another thing that we've happened, we did work on a project that we had one of the vendors. We were creating a mobile app for the project, and the vendor that was creating the web application was not an agile. They didn't practice agile; they practice in waterfall. So what we did was we did get them involved in kind of a scrum of scrums process, and we worked with them kind of in a pseudo agile way. And we just made sure that they were aware of the work that we were doing on through our user stories. And if there were any requirements that we needed from this other vendor, that was the highest priority, that kind of, you know, that they worked on. So they were able to slightly modify their processes just to be able to work with us in our agile way. So there are some tricks that you can use to work with these non-agile partners and vendors.
That's great feedback. So once again, here's a slide where we actually juxtapose survey results. The blue line you're seeing with there is we choose our suppliers based on how well their agility aligns with ours. And you can see it was a relatively flat line. However, among those survey respondents who said that they agree or strongly agree with that question, we also asked them to please rate your organization's ability to ship faster than similar companies. So Susanna, it almost looks like if you're trying to figure out how to get your company into that top quintile of speed, choosing a vendor that speaks your language could be a competitive advantage. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to sound flippant here, but it's kind of a no-brainer in terms of aligning a way of working with your vendors. You know, Scrum at its heart is really a social framework. It's all about getting people to communicate effective with each other on a cadence that's quick enough to stay aligned and pivot quickly together. And so I think if you can extend that way of working to your vendors, or your vendors can quickly adapt, then you're gonna see a positive effect.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting because the more you think about it, it's larger concentric circles, if you will, because it starts with the Scrum team, and then Susanna, with your experience, then you scale it beyond to other functions. Why would you not take it out to your vendors? So very, very well said. I want to remind the audience, we've got one more topic to discuss, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. Please keep those questions coming in. Feel free to upvote the ones that you like as well. Really appreciate everyone's participation today. So in addition to benchmarking where organizations work currently regarding agility, participants were asked where they expected to be in 3 short years. And it's interesting, super strong optimism was shown here. In fact, as more than 90% of our survey respondents expected to be more agile than they currently were. In fact, better than 2/3 expected to have either agile at scale or enterprise level within 3 years. Just going to remind you, less than half of that number reported as that being their current reality. So people are extremely, extremely bullish. And so the question that I have for you, Tom, is this, as we look at these results, to me, this one is actually one of the most optimistic and the best thing that we can say about this Agile Manifesto as it turns 20 years old, that pretty much across the board, all of our survey respondents said, not only do we want to be more agile, we expect to be more agile in 3 years. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, and we've seen it personally with all the projects. Done well, agile is amazing. It is a truly amazing way to manage software development. You take something that's written on a napkin and turn that into you kind of expand that out to a product backlog. You estimate the size of it. You put in a predicted schedule, and we are able to get concrete results, industry level software out and working within days of that predicted schedule. There's no other management style that or framework that could do that, especially for software development. So I think it's proven, if it's done right, it absolutely works. But it also goes to the point that, as things that we've mentioned early, throughout this webinar, it has to be embraced by the entire company to be reached its full potential. And I think that's part of what we're seeing here is people say, yeah, we're practicing it, but we want to expand it throughout our company to make it work better.
Very, very well said. And that moves us on to our Q&A. Tina, I actually want to start a question that I have for you, because I know in the many hats that you wear for Ascendle, you head up operations. So when we talk about hiring a vendor who speaks a common language, I'm curious how you think about hiring employees, and what does it mean to you when you're bringing a new employee into Ascendle, if you will? Does that common language matter? Do you like to bring someone in who has no agile experience because they've learned it the wrong way? Or do you like someone who has an agile experience that maybe just hasn't been to the level that they like? How do you think about, speaking that common language for prospective employees?
I would say that our onboarding is really good, and we have a really good understanding of our process. So if we did hire someone who, frankly, I was that someone 4 years ago. I joined Ascendle with years of software development experience, but no active agile experience. But, as a plug for Dave's book, Dave's book wasn't written yet, but we had a lot of that process documentation that became Dave's book. And that is what really helped. So I think it is certainly helpful if we bring someone in who already understands that agile mindset, common set of principles and terms. But what's really helpful, I think, is having a repeatable process, because we can take someone with varying experience and train them on our repeatable Scrum process and some of our best practices and our, feeling of how we build quality into every step of our process. And that's how we get people up to speed quickly on kind of our way. We actually call it like the Ascendle way of applying Scrum.
There you go. And kind of relates back to what Susanna was talking about with those scaled frameworks, if you will, is you take those rules and then you build onto them. Susanna, I actually want to pivot to you now on a scaled framework question. So you're in a situation where you try a scaled framework. I'm going to guess that it's no different than learning Scrum. You gotta get some bruises. You gotta learn to do it right. You gotta trip a couple times. How do you make the decision to say, you know what? This scaled framework isn't right for us? Would you advise somebody to try it for 3 months, 6 months, 2 sprints? How do you think about it? Or is it, well, listen, if you're following Agile methodology, you're always asking yourselves those questions. You're always doing a retrospective on how it's working.
Well, you kind of hit on one part of my answer here. I think that it's really important, to borrow some words from a mentor, to be honest with yourselves as an organization about whether or not you're truly following the framework and keeping the rigor that's necessary to have true Agile practice. And whether, relating back to that earlier question about leadership, whether everybody's truly bought in. I don't know if I have an exact amount of time to try it for, but I would just caution that change management takes a while. I have recent experience thinking something would have been rolled out in as little of a quarter, and a year later we're still working on that change management. So I guess I would advise, don't abandon at first when it doesn't work. Evaluate, be honest with yourself, get to the root cause. And I think, as I mentioned before, think about how you can adapt the framework instead of abandon it.
Outstanding, thank you. I actually, I'm gonna pull an audible here. I believe we have some questions in the chat. For some reason, the chat window is not working for me. I just got a direct message from one of our producers. Tom, do you see questions in your chat window?
I do, yes.
Okay. Would you play the role of Marcus here for a few minutes and toss those to Tina or Susanna?
Sure.
I'll take that first one.
You want to take the first one, Susanna? Sure. So there's a question about, do you see specific business fields or industries that are significantly more receptive to being truly Agile than others? What are the stated reasons? Huh?
I meant the second one, but I'll try that one. Okay. Or Tina, if you want to.
I can add on to the first one after you take a go at it, Susanna.
I haven't really seen specific industries, so I don't know if I could talk about this all that well. But what I have seen, which I think directly relates, is different types of departments working agilely and truly embracing it. And the real reasons where we've seen struggle with that is it's different than the way people are used to working. So back to my comment about change management, I think that's the real reason for resistance to this way of working, because everything's not written down and prescriptive. People have to take ownership, dig in, and kind of learn and build together. Go ahead, Tina.
Did you have something to add, Tina?
Yeah, so I'm trying to read exactly. Okay, so the ones that are more receptive, those are probably the types of clients that we work with. Clients that are either startups, as Tom said, startups are very receptive to being agile. Companies that have software that is going to be used by end users where they need to get that constant market feedback are very receptive. And on the reverse, I think there are companies that have certain compliance considerations or traditions of needing to provide lots of documentation, maybe companies that work with the FDA or other organizations like that, that have been in that waterfall mindset longer. And then one thing that I've frequently heard, it's not an industry, but it's a type of project, is that ERP implementations can't be agile. Ascendle does not do ERP implementations, but I would argue that there is a way to pilot an ERP implementation in an agile fashion. So, you know, when you see that the Department of Defense, other large federal organizations now have mandates to build software in an agile way, if they can do it, I would say any industry could try to find how to be more agile within the constraints of their industry.
Excellent.
I don't know if I fully answered that, but
I appreciate the answer, and I've been provided with a few of the questions from the field. So
Great.
thank you to our producer. I love this question. Do you find leadership is still looking for and trying to buy raw speed increases, or are they starting to value maximizing that work that's not done, minimizing waste, and achieving better outcomes by taking those much smaller steps? Are they going after raw speed, or are they really trying to run their business better?
is that the one you wanted to do, Susanna?
No, I think the one I was looking at, I'm not looking right now.
Okay.
It's about speed to delivery versus craftsmanship and quality.
Well, I think for this question, that's a hard one for me to answer, but my gut feeling is that I think they're probably looking for both. I think there's improvements that can be made on both sides. You know, you certainly you want to maximize how quickly you get to market, and that's what I think of by speed. I don't think of speed as, you know, we're just moving fast, but it's you know, we're working in an efficient way to get our product out in front of our customers, or our improvement to our product out in front of our customers as quickly as possible. And I think that's done by minimizing waste and working in working in a more productive way, not by actually trying to work faster.
There's a question here, Tom, you know, also related to speed in terms of how it impacts craftsmanship or maintainability. You know, what do you hear from developers? You know, are they concerned about the quality of code with so much emphasis on speed as opposed to quality?
Sure, I've got a lot to say about this, but I know Susanna has been itching for this one, so I'll let you go first, Susanna.
Well, the point I wanted to make that I was biting my tongue on is I just wanted to point out that speed to market is not the same as fast coding. So in Agile, it's not, you know, that speed, if you're kind of referring to the last question, that raw speed. In Agile, it's really more about identifying those points of value delivering, designing that MVP, and aligning your backlog to be able to deliver that in a shippable way on cadence. But a piece we haven't really talked about today is doing that with rigor. So to specifically address the question, I don't think you can sacrifice quality for speed. But if your backlog is aligned the correct way, I think there are certain practices you can embrace to keep quality high. What comes to mind is, you know, always incorporating quality checks, code reviews in each sprint, only building what you need. We have a term at Ascendle that we use called YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it. So not over producing the solution, keeping it very simple, not leaving quality checks to the end of the development of the product, doing that along the way the whole time. And leadership, listen up, not being afraid of the word refactor. If you're only building what you need now, there may be some things you need to refactor later, but doing those along the time frame of when you actually need it, I think helps with speed.
It's a great answer.
And doesn't sacrifice quality.
and doesn't sacrifice quality. Susanna, I want to stay with you for this next question because I'm sure at the enterprise you see it all the time. And this is one, this is a terrible question to ask you 63 minutes into a webinar or wherever we are on the clock here, because it's a simple question, but it is not easy. How do you actually get the rest of your organization aligned with your team?
I think about this every day at work. I think the most important factor, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'll really harp on it now. The most important factor is visibility into the vision of where the organization is going and what the priorities are, clear, established goals, and having everybody aligned to that. I think if you can do that as leadership, and again, this ties back to leadership truly being supportive of the Agile process, then all the teams can align and can be trusted to align and work with each other, their particular backlogs and the activities they need to complete to those goals. And I think that's how you do it. It comes from the top, it comes from the vision and the shared goals.
That's a great, that's just a tremendous answer. Thank you. We're coming down here to our final couple questions. There is debate as to whether or not the Jeff Bezos quote was one pizza or two pizzas. But the point is well taken. You should be able to feed your Scrum team relatively easy. So now I also have a question here for Tina, which goes back to, we talked about, vendor alignment. Vendor behavior sometimes can be driven by those statements of work, those SOWs, which are written in a way to get approval from the finance department of the business. We've talked about these silos before. What have you experienced in getting finance and the statements of work that follow to transform to match Agile development? Wow, yeah, the devil's in the details on that one, Tina. What do you do?
Yes. Well, when I was getting a SAFe certification, one of the scaled Agile frameworks, there was something in there that was really eye-opening for me. In the past, companies used to say, I'm going to fund and put in my budget a specific project, right? And maybe that project has 200,000 allocated to it. And I'm going to staff up a project team specifically for that project. And it's all focused on what the team is building. Well, with SAFe, it's a whole different mindset that I like, which is fund a capacity instead and always have that team or team of teams working on the highest priority work for that solution. So you may say, we have a certain product line, software product line. We're going to fund 5 teams this year, and then we will keep feeding them the highest priority because priorities change. What do you do if you fund that project, you staff up that project, and then you find that that is not the right thing to be doing for your customers? Now you have to disband that team, go fund another project. So I guess we find it easier to work with clients who also have that kind of Agile mindset. So when we do a statement of work, we typically say, we can give you this size team for this many sprints based on what you appear to want to get done. And we will keep ruthlessly prioritizing and always working on the highest priority work for that project. So it is a different mindset, and not all companies are ready to do that, especially companies that have to send out RFPs and ask for, you must tell me when this can be done and how much this is going to cost. It goes right back to one of the Agile main principles, which is collaboration over contract negotiation. But I get that not all companies are there yet in their thinking.
Yes, I think we could do a whole program on finance companies and finance divisions and how Agile.
Sorry, you can tell I'm passionate about that.
No, it's a great answer. Hey, I believe we got all the questions and answers in there. I certainly want to thank Tom Schwendler for helping me out there for a couple minutes.
Oh, sure.
I want to thank Tina Reynolds and Susanna Parham-Mitchell. What a great program that we have today. Before we go, I do want to thank everyone for joining us today during the webinar. As always, be on the lookout for an email containing a copy of the white paper and a full recording of today's program. Thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.